Good evening, everyone. I had to come in a bit earlier then because that music was doing my head in. That was a StreamYard special called Feeding the Ducks. Because I forgot to ask Jamila for some music from one of our artists beforehand. But thanks for joining us this evening. I'm really made up to be chatting to Jamila this evening because she's somebody that I used to work with a long time ago, and I think shares a lot of the same ethos and the same kind of thoughts and feelings towards working with artists and working with like early career artists through to building careers up as well, in the same way that I like to do it as well. Um, as always, if you've got any questions, throw them in the chat, and then I'll throw them into the conversation where it's relevant, or I'll wait until the end. But without further ado, I'm just going to bring Jam in. Hi.
Hello.
So,
Hi.
so before we get started, kind of talking through, I guess, your role of an artist manager, what I always like to do when I'm speaking to different people is kind of talk about the journey that's kind of got you to where you are. I think specifically with artist management, I think we're all products of like all of our experiences in the industry to date before we actually start being at the helm of people's careers in the way that we are. And that we've all got different things to offer and all got different outlooks and different areas of the industry that we feel comfortable in working in. So, can you give us a bit of a rundown of you, your career, what you like
Yeah,
to do?
yeah, absolutely. So I actually my first ever job in the music industry was in artist management. I was an assistant to one person who had their own management company, and I did that for about I think it was nearly 3 years. So I got a real baptism of fire of how things work on the management side, where you are literally doing absolutely everything, and it slightly terrified me, and I kind of thought maybe it isn't for me because I didn't quite understand, um, it being my first job in the music industry. I didn't
Yeah,
quite understand all the different skills that you need, and you have to be incredibly resourceful, and you've got to be super diligent, and you've got to be obviously passionate about the artists that you're working with, and constantly fighting for your clients. And yeah, it was an incredible time, and I learned so much. And there were lots of other areas in the business that I was fascinated by. So I kind of then pivoted into A&R, major label world, for the best part of around 10 years. And yeah, that I definitely feel like I did it all in major label world, and sort of got to the end of my yeah my experience, and realized that the thing that I missed was the all-encompassing nature of being in management. And I'd sort of dabbled a little bit through the 10 years that was in A&R, and yeah, I just really missed that. And I feel like the industry changed so much from when I started,
yeah,
um, and that um, being able to do A&R and being able to do all these other things as a manager, it's even more important now that you're able to do those things. And I feel like previously, when I first started, uh, it was things were a lot more separate. And if you had particularly at a major label, if your artist was signed to a major label, if you had an A&R person um, that was working your artist, you as the manager didn't necessarily need to be as involved in that side of the business.
mhm, yeah,
Whereas I feel like that's completely changed on its head. And then, prior to me doing the the first management role, um, I'm from Manchester, and I wasn't fortunate enough to be a nepo baby. uh didn't didn't know anyone, didn't know anyone in the industry, so I was writing for lots of music magazines, and I have had a music blog, and was kind of putting myself out there, and didn't really realize what I was doing at the time. It wasn't super purposeful. It was just to have a
mhm.
good time and get into shows for free predominantly. And that's how I ended up meeting people from the industry in order to get that first role. When I moved to London for uni at 18, and then dropped out. And then, all those kind of people that I'd met through that time, that's when it all became really useful.
One of the things that I remember when you had your blog, is like you popping up in different places, curating lineups for some pretty hefty people. I remember that you were over at South by, like,
Yeah,
which is quite timely with it being South by Southwest this week. But those opportunities of, like, you know, like stage curation and like who you selected as being those kind of eyes and ears of the industry, like how instrumental is kind of seeking out opportunities like that where you're partnering with like those bigger brands. It was like Hype Machine, who was like kind of quite important at the time, weren't they?
yeah.
In kind of collating all of that noise that all of those blogs were making into this is who you should listen to. Like, what was that like?
Lots of fun. And again, I think definitely probably the first half of my like working life in the industry, I don't think I went about things with lots of particular purpose and lots of I'm gonna go and meet this person because
Yeah.
in 5 years' time they might be able to give me a job at so and so, or I didn't have that grand ambition of I'm gonna be a label president eventually. And so I think a lot of what I was doing was just to have experiences and have fun and learn about the business. So for me, getting to do those things like putting on events with South by and getting to go to South by and see what the atmosphere is like, and how crazy it is and everybody's running between shows, and I think for me helped me eventually solidify, uh you know 10 years down the line, okay, this is where I feel like, a, it's still enjoyable, but also
Yeah.
b, I've got a bit of insight and I understand how this process works. So yeah, obviously great at the time for meeting people and being able to put that on my, social media, as that's kind of everybody's resume now. That's everyone's CV, is, you put everything on socials to kind of attract the right attention. So for me, being able to put that on socials and shout about that and say, I did X, Y, and Z was helpful in the moment, but I think after the fact, and particularly now, yeah, super valuable because I know what it's like. I know the ins and outs of booking shows.
One of the things that I've done a few like kind of more educational events recently, and particularly some of the panel discussions and the way that it's been framed is around networking. Like,
Mm,
the word networking to me is anxiety inducing. I feel like it's so barbed, and it feels so corporate as well. And it's just
definitely.
like it's really really true what you've just said. Like, I don't think anyone really kind of goes into those situations going, right, I'm going to do this because it's going to take me there, and it's going to then this is going to happen. But like, one of my experiences like that's fundamentally shaped my career is just meeting people that are doing totally different things to me in this industry, but end up being super super useful because you don't know where people are going to go or what people are going to do.
Completely.
Like,
Completely.
it's amazing kind of going along on that ride, and then like you end up 8-10 years like later on, and you're like, oh my god, that person's doing that amazing thing.
Yeah, totally. And I obviously, as long as you're nice to people, I think generally if you've met people or you've hung out with people, if it is 10 years, 15 years down the line and you go, oh, actually, that person could help me with X, Y, Z, or
Yeah.
I've got a support artist that could work for their artist, or a tour that they're booking, or, there's generally, it's an industry where you have to be, it's collaborative, right? You have to help
Mhm.
people. You've got to be helped yourself. So any of those things that you're doing, whether it's like going to shows or booking your own bands or managing things or all these little day-to-day interactions, like generally you will end up coming across people again in some form, as long as people stay in the industry. So yeah, that to me is the essence of networking. It isn't going around to some stale room with a few croissants in it and going and handing out like a business card in the morning when everyone's hungover. It's like that stuff doesn't really work. You've got to just, yeah, I think being in the right spaces or being in spaces at all,
Yeah.
and then trying to work out like how can you be involved in some of the things that are going on, whether it is like just my one of the things that I used to do when I was writing reviews when I was in Manchester, I used to, if I couldn't find a magazine to let me write a review for a show, I'd email, or MySpace back in the day, MySpace the band, and say, "Do you need someone to do your merch table?" Or
Mm,
do you need someone to like ferry your stuff in and out of the venue, or like whatever it was. And through that, you kind of meet promoters, you meet managers, you meet. So I think it's just working out like, what is your, in this scenario, what can you offer as well? And then it's much easier to strike up a conversation with somebody about something than just, I'm here to meet people.
yeah, yeah, definitely. I always think as well, it's just like it's being a participant, isn't it? It's like if you're wanting to kind of meet people in the industry, be part of the industry, you kind of have to leave that feeling of being a spectator or just a fan a little bit behind you and just
Yeah,
think, how do I get involved?
exactly.
So when you were A&R in and you were dealing with managers like, left, right, and center, what was it that was there any like qualities in managers that you like enjoyed working with that you think has helped you going back into that world?
A plan. Managers with a plan. Because there's lots of managers that don't have any plan. Um, and I understand why, but in order to be useful and in order to be helpful, um, the everyone always says you make a plan to break a plan. But if you
Yeah,
don't have the plan in the first place, there isn't usually or it's harder to reach consensus on where to start and then where to go. And I think even if the plan isn't the grand, in 10 years we're going to be selling out 10 Wembleys, and it doesn't have to be that. It just has to be, it could literally just be, in 6 months we'd like to play at our local 200 cap venue.
yeah,
That, even if that's the plan, for me that's helpful. um and I think that was something that I think sometimes, maybe a little bit less so now, because I think people are much more independent spirited and independent minded in general. But I think sometimes people, and even on the artist side, you sometimes see they think, I'm going to get a manager and they're going to do everything for me. Or
mhm,
I'm going to sign to a record label and they're going to do everything for me. So I don't need to come up with anything. I don't need to come up with the ideas. Or I'm going to get a live agent and they're going to come up with the plan for me.
yeah,
It's like, actually, it's always great and best if the plan comes from the nucleus of whatever the project is. So if that is, it might be a band where there's four people and one person in particular in the band is particularly good at planning ahead. So maybe it just comes from that one person. Maybe it's a joint effort. Maybe it's a solo artist with a manager that work very closely in tandem. But the plan has to come from, generally, I say it's always best when it comes from the artist, because then you have a lot less deviation from what the artist actually wants to do.
yeah,
If you get 10 people coming up with ideas, you're going to be pulled in. They might not be drastically different from one another, but you are going to be pulled in 10 different directions. Because if the artist and the manager are the ones that go, cool, here's our short term plan for the next 6 months, and then roughly here's where we want to go in the next 12 months. That for me was always the thing that I looked for in the very first meeting with a manager. I'd go, music that I've heard sounds fantastic, or I saw a show, it was brilliant. What's going on?
yeah.
Right?
Next question, what's your plan?
Exactly. And uh, like, I would say a track record in whatever field the artist is in, but I don't think that's necessarily a barometer of things as much anymore.
Mhm,
Um, I think for me, it's just trying to find teams, as an A&R person, it was trying to find teams that knew themselves, had a bit of a plan, and could be resourceful in pulling in things outside of maybe a label's remit. So, or things that, traditionally day to day a label isn't uh, hyper focused on. So whether that's going out and making sure the shows are brilliant,
yeah,
or
yeah,
going out and getting syncs, or making, if the artist wants to write for other people, like just making sure that there's stuff going on and it isn't all just what can you do for us?
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, it's something that we did a really great session a couple of weeks ago, which is kind of like, it was one that we'd wanted to do a while ago, but we'd had to kind of reschedule it, and it kind of just changed overnight into what that session was going to be, which was about identity and how important saying no is. You know, when you're trying to build up an artist and not saying yes to everything that falls your way. And we kind of looked at this session, and then when we were like trying to plan it and trying to like work it out, we were just like, all this falls down to is get a plan, like have a plan, have something that you're working towards that is informed by your ambitions, your identity, and you'll realize what the right opportunities are and where you should be going and what is going to give you the stepping stones that you need. And like, as you've just said, it might be, we want to sell out 200 tickets in our hometown in 6 months. What's going to get you there?
Completely.
Yeah, so it's funny how that, it always just falls to that direction. It's just
Yeah.
like, be mindful about the decisions that you're making, that they're pushing you forward to where you want to be.
Yeah.
So when you kind of like got to the end of the label A&R journey and you started looking at management, how did you go about building your roster up? Like, what were the expectations at that point?
So the two things kind of coincided with one another. There was a producer who I work with now, a producer who I'd met through one of the last projects that I was trying to sign. And a kind of a light bulb went off in my head when I met him and he said that he didn't have a manager. And I was like, really? Surely you do, because you're brilliant and you're doing lots, and there's good stuff happening, and you're lovely. And yeah, I was baffled. Um, and so I'd met him, and the kind of the reason why I'd met him is the art spent probably half of our first meeting talking about him. You've got to meet him. He's incredible, and get him involved in all your projects. And I was like, okay, okay, okay. And yeah,
That sounds too easy. That's what I was
I
like,
know.
here's somebody for you.
Yeah, and at the time, I think my job satisfaction was plummeting quite heavily, and I think meeting him for me was one of the final signs that it
Yeah,
was the right time to do something else. And I didn't want to jump 2 feet in because it was a big change. But at the same time, like, I realized my excitement at meeting him was so much higher than my excitement of getting up and doing the A&R job every day. And yeah, it gave me a great excuse to be to go and just really hunt a few things down.
yeah.
And so it was kind of almost a challenge to myself. Like, can I even find something else that I'm as excited about as I am with him? And so, yeah, maybe like that was the end of 2021. Is that right? I've lost where we are in years, to be
I
honest, because
I'm
of COVID.
exactly the same. Like, I've got
It,
no timeline anymore.
yeah,
It's
like
ridiculous.
zero. No, sorry, I met him at the very end of 2020.
I feel like it was because I remember that conversation with you where you were just like,
Yeah,
I'm going into management. And it must have
yeah,
been around that time because it was when we
yeah.
were still doing stuff online at the venue.
Yeah. So
2020.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was the end of yeah, because it was all weird, and I think I had to meet him on Zoom first because we were
Yeah.
still in the weird lockdown thing. Um, and so I gave myself a couple of months. I was like, just a challenge to myself. Let me see if I can find anything else. And I found something that again I thought might be more of an A&R label signing. Came across him, realized it was ridiculously early in his journey. And I was like, look, let me recce this
Yeah.
first. Went and met him, and I was like, he's phenomenal. I'm obsessed. And kind of went home, and I was like, I'd have to put it with a manager, and we'd have to do a development deal. And I was like, I don't want anybody else to manage him. I'm going to manage him. So it was another one of those things where I was like, I don't really want anybody else to work on this. I want to do it. And around that time, I was like, I think this is the right time. because I'm finding stuff and I'm excited, and I don't have any passion left for the other job. And it's not fair, you know. It wouldn't have been fair for me to continue doing A&R, working on projects when I don't have that same drive.
Yeah, I think if your head's already pivoted towards doing that, you've got to follow
Yeah,
it, haven't you? I think that's
yeah,
really interesting what you were saying about that artist being too early, because this is something that we talk about all of the time, is just like, when's the right time to find a manager? And I think it does depend on that manager as well. It's just like, you know, often we tell artists, you've got to build your project up so there's something to manage.
yeah,
But as an artist manager, if you meet somebody and you go away and you have that feeling where it's just like, I can't let this one lie.
yeah.
Like, if I don't do it, somebody else is going to do it, then you're going to pick it up, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. And I think as you were saying, it depends on your skills as a manager. If you are somebody that is perhaps maybe you're a manager that's at a big massive management company, and you have lots of other projects on, and you don't have time or the facility to develop something from really early on, it might not be the right time to get involved. So yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. It's just all about the timing, really. And I think what you said about building your project up is you can do that in so many different ways as an artist. And building your project up doesn't necessarily mean you've got to go out and like virtually have all the DSPs knocking your door down to get a manager. It's just
yeah.
building yourself up till you put yourself in the right place where that right manager does come across you and goes, I've got time for this, I can take this on, I'm coming in at the right point. And for me, I had lots and lots of time on my hands, so I could really get in the trenches, and build something from. He had. I say it's from the trenches because it's artist development takes forever. It takes a long, 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 long time to build a genuine fan base. But when I met him and I'd seen a couple of things on socials, but then in person, I was like, so I've seen your bits online, and I'd love to know more about kind of your music processes, and have you recorded stuff? You've been in sessions with people, and he was like, oh yeah, I'm about to release an 18-track album that I have written, produced, played every instrument on. He's like, the only thing I didn't do was mix it. I was like, oh, okay, so you've thought about it and you've got ideas, and there's
Yeah,
stuff to get into, so it wasn't just like he had a 10-second snippet online. He'd
yeah.
done a lot of work already. It just wasn't publicly
It wasn't
available.
visible. So wait, if you're having that conversation with somebody where they're just like, yeah, I've got an album good to go, what's your reaction to that?
Obviously, I hadn't heard it, so I was like, "Can I hear it first?" And for me, it was just about, uh, particularly at that stage, finding the touch points of what he really wanted to achieve with that project. And for him, it was he just wanted to put something out, right? But he
Yeah,
didn't have the facility. He didn't know. So he was like, all I've been doing for the last couple of years, in particular during lockdown, he's like just writing and writing and writing and writing and writing. And eventually he got to the point where he's like, I feel like I need an outlet. So I just looked around and was like, people put albums out, I'll put an album out. So it wasn't necessarily born out of anything that was like uber strategic. I think it was
yeah,
more cathartic for him.
yeah,
And so then I was able to kind of assess, go through, look at the tracks, work out, okay, so musically, what else do you want to achieve? Are you interested in kind of developing the sound? You say you've produced and played every instrument on the song. Is that something you want to do going forwards? It's all for me was really about assessing the situation and working out where he was, what was done out of necessity because he was totally independent, and what was done because he was that's how he wanted to continue.
yeah.
And kind of transpires that he was like, I just did this because I didn't know anyone and I didn't know how to sort of start that process and get in sessions. And he was like, I'd love to work with. And then he gave me his long, long, long list of people that he wanted to work with. So I was like, should we try and tick some of these off? And then maybe we see if we can beat some of these songs that are on this album going forwards. And then we work towards putting a project out, but let's spend a little bit of time together as well. We got
Mhm.
to get to know each other. Do we work well together? Is this something that is good for you and good for me? And start the musical development process side of things. And yeah, he absolutely loved it. And one of the, I think maybe there's another one that's coming out, but one of the songs from the 18 track album came out on his first EP. So we still used some of that stuff,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it was very much a basis for the first project. We just managed to beat 17 of the tracks, or 16.
Wow. That's incredible. That's so amazing. It feels like right time, right place to a certain extent as well, doesn't it? Like
Yeah.
you would have just put that out.
Yeah. But and that's the thing, is like he would have put it out and it probably would have his dad would have seen it, but I don't know that there was no strategy. There was no like, it would have just love heart emoji from his mom. It's cute, but I think, yeah,
Yeah.
it was definitely the right time.
That sounds incredible. When you were kind of considering those like initial bands or initial artists that you were wanting to work with, did you have any criteria in your head of like the type of person, the type of artist that you wanted to find, or were you kind of just open?
Um, I think the number one, two number ones, equal pegging was, I have to be able to listen to the music over and over and over and over and over and
Yeah.
over. Um,
I mean, that's essential.
yeah, yeah,
That's what you're gonna do.
yeah, absolutely. I have to believe that they are talented, of course, because it sounds like a really basic, super obvious thing, but there are lots of people who I think uh, expect things to be easy with a certain type of project, and I
Yeah.
think don't always necessarily think about um, the mechanics of just really being in the thick of it with the artist and with the music. And it's never plain sailing. Nothing ever just works and is ever just easy. And even if it does, it's hard in the middle and it's hard at the end, and it's difficult, right? So you've got to have almost like an unwavering. You have to be a fan as
Yeah,
the
gotcha.
artist. Um, and so that, like, just being a fan of them and what they do, big big part of, I think that's gut reaction as well, though. You can't always distill that into, there's not a science behind some of that stuff, like why you're a fan of things. And then for me, it's their work ethic, because as I just said, it's difficult, it's hard. You got to keep working hard when things are difficult, and um, ultimately, in the end, you know, yes, working with artists and having a particular roster is a reflection on me and my journey and my career. But in the end, it's the artist's journey, it's their life, it's their work, it's their art, it's their soul that they're bearing to everybody. So I would hope that they would want to work hard for that. And I think
Mm.
there's different ways of working hard, but I think it's about figuring out, how do you maximize what you're doing in a way that suits you and your personality. You might have somebody on your roster that is neurodivergent. You might have somebody that has uh caring responsibilities at home. You might have somebody that is there's a bajillion different things that could be going on that mean somebody isn't able, they might have a full-time job. That there's loads of things that mean somebody isn't just going crazy, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That I'm not talking about the like hustle grind horrible thing. But I'm just talking about somebody that has the passion and the drive to have a vision and to be able to work out alongside a manager what is what's the dream, but also what is feasible. And then when there is a plan in place, be able to execute on that
Yeah.
plan.
What do those early conversations look like? Is there stuff that you explain to them, particularly that younger artist that, didn't really know anything and has just, made that music? Like, what did you find that you had to explain to them about the industry, about the process, about, you know, developing, I guess, as well?
Everything. Everything. Uh I think that's the thing with management is like you're always explaining, right? Like there's always stuff there's always stuff to talk about. There's always like making sure that everybody is on the same page and has the right understanding of how
Yeah.
things work and the processes. And I think definitely at the beginning, I'm keen to not with somebody that's, maybe they haven't gone through the self-release process themselves. So they're very green to everything. I'm keen to not overwhelm because there's so many things that are like that you just go, why is publishing divided into 12s? Right? Like that it's crazy, it's stupid. You don't need to necessarily get into the uber minor details of things, but I think just giving people a general overview of like, what the difference is between ways of releasing music. And I think what's really important, and for me trying to be as transparent as possible, is I constantly, particularly at the beginning, explain to an artist that they own this stuff, right? Like the
Yeah.
music that you put out, it's a it's something that you own, as well as it being your art and expression, and you go out and you perform live. Like you own this stuff. You own the rights to this. So it's really important that you understand what that means.
Yeah. And how to
Um,
do it.
exactly. So for me, explaining that part of things is kind of really important. Explaining the role of a manager and explaining, I guess, the things that I would traditionally, the traditional role of a manager, and then explaining your own boundaries. I don't love a 3 a.m. call. Um, so it's explaining those, right? And you've got to feel each other out, and you've got to work out. I've got one of my roster is an extremely early riser. She's up at 6 a.m. Um, two of my roster in particular are night owls. They're still awake at 3
Mhm.
a.m. One sort of sleeps most of the time, fine. So it's just trying to explain like where, okay, I am available, but I'm not always constantly available. And
Yeah.
if you want to have conversations about X, Y, Z, it's probably best to do those on the phone so that we can really hash out the details. Or I think it's just, yeah, explaining your ways of working, explaining your boundaries, and giving a general overview of like, I would like to introduce you to a lawyer. This is what lawyers do X, Y traditionally, but you should go and meet them. They're your lawyer. They're not my
Yeah.
lawyer. Just trying to explain some of the differences between some of those really crucial early roles.
I think that's a super key one. And obviously it's definitely something that's come up with all the campaigning that Rebecca Ferguson's doing around
Yeah.
having your lawyer and your accountant separate from your manager and your label and everything, having that
Mm,
separate. But I think that it has to be very, very clear that the managers will recommend those people. Like,
yeah.
I think there's a difference between it being in the same camp and the lawyer also representing the manager and representing the artist, or working for the same company as the manager.
Yeah.
Like that's one thing. But those really, really key people that will help protect that property and that artist, 9 times out of 10, it is the manager that does recommend them.
Yeah.
Like
And I,
it's
I think my only way that you uh, try and alleviate any of that nervousness around that is to present options,
yeah,
right? So like generally uh, you have an idea of who you think might be the best suited, but I always think it's best to present options and say, I'm recommending these 4 lawyers because they work with XYZ publishers really well, or they work with this similar producers on their
yeah,
roster, or they've got the right temperament for you, or they've got space at the moment, or I think, and then it's up to the artist to go do the meetings. Hopefully they catch a vibe in person and they can go,
yeah,
right, okay, that makes sense to me, or that didn't seem right. And even with accountants, I've just done it for one of my roster where I presented 3 options and I said, I think these 3 are best suited to you because XYZ. You take the meetings so that you can ask all the questions and just make sure that that connection is not just my manager said I should meet you, you know?
Yeah, that they feel that they can
They're
ask those questions, like,
exactly, because they are
they're
that person is working for them, it's that person's
yeah,
working in their team. They should feel comfortable and confident and able to go, "Mm," even on, I'd hope this would never be the case or this would ever happen, but they should feel confident enough to go, "My manager sent me a statement and I've got some
yeah,
queries about this. Can I pick your brains to the accountant or,
mhm,
to the lawyer? We've just got this deal in, and I really want to ask you some questions on this. And I feel like you might have a better insight than my manager has on this particular
yeah.
point." Like the artist should feel comfortable to do that.
I think that's something that's really key with those management artist relationships though, as well, is that, the person that you're working with isn't gatekeepery. Like,
Yes.
that the artist has got license to kind of go out and have conversations about their career with other people and not
Yeah,
just their manager to a certain extent.
completely.
So what happens if, like, as I was saying before about like artist managers, we're all kind of products of what we've done before. Obviously, you came into the industry working in management, but it can also be quite lonely as well if you're not working as part of a big team and you're not working for a management company. What happens if something happens that you don't know what to do, or like you don't know the answer to a question?
I mean, that's literally every day. Um,
You said
yeah,
that.
that's literally every single day of my life, even on a Sunday. Um, I have become, uh I don't know that I was ever that shy about asking people questions. I'm exceptionally nosy, which is very helpful. So I just ask people, I'm like, "This has come up," or "What do you do about this?" Like today, I was asking, I literally went around and asked 5 different managers, what they do, how they structure their tour budgets for DJs, because obviously when you DJ, you're DJing off very often if things are going
Yeah,
well,
yeah,
whereas generally on the traditional act, you have tours that you do, so
yeah,
you plot out a budget per tour generally. Um, Whereas for DJ, I'm like, do you do a budget for every show? That's ridiculous. Do you do it monthly? Or are you just doing the summer? And yeah, so I literally went around and asked 5 managers today. I was like, how do you work your roster? How do you work your roster? And I got a few of the same answers, and that they're like, it's a DJ, you don't need to do a tour budget. Um, Answers. And I'm like, I don't know if that seems right to me. So I still don't fully know. Like I don't think there's ever uh in some of these instances, I don't think there's like one
yeah.
correct answer or one correct way to do things. But I think just being not shy and not feeling like any question is a stupid question, not feeling like I should have the answer to every single thing ever as well.
Mhm. Yeah.
Because my brain doesn't work like that. It's not that giant.
No one,
Um,
like, if anyone says that they know everything, they're lying.
yeah.
Without a doubt. It was one of, like, going back to what we were talking about before about, like, what qualities that you picked up on it in good managers that you worked with. For me, when I was working at a record label, I really appreciated the managers that asked questions when they didn't know what I was
Mm,
talking about. There was a few times, and I'm obviously not gonna name names, but there was a few times when, like, I'd send a request through for an artist to do something, and they'd either just, like, kind of ignore it, or, like, they'd say, "Oh, no, they don't wanna do it." And I'm like, "Do they know what it is? Do they know
mm,
that if we do that, then that'll happen, and blah, 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 blah?" And I feel like a lot of those situations that I got into with certain managers, it's just because they didn't know. And rather
mm,
than just going, "Can you just run that by me again? Like, what does that actually entail? What does that mean?" Like, I clung to the artist managers that asked questions, and
yeah.
for me, it was a couple of self-managed bands that were just like, "I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about." And I appreciate that so much. I love it when people just go, "I've no idea."
Yeah.
Like, "I don't know."
Yeah.
Like, it really concerns me when, like, this was a management team. It was 2 managers that were just like,
Gloss over everything.
they yeah, they just they wouldn't question anything. They just wouldn't do
Mm.
it. It was really weird. And
Yeah.
it's not something that I'd encountered like that in that way. But like, and I've heard about it from friends as well, with like who are being managed by people where when requests come through, they're not being dealt with, and I sometimes wonder if that's because of that as well, is because they're
Yeah.
scared to go, is that a good deal? I don't, like on a sync or something like that, is that a good deal? I'm not sure. I love it when people ask me questions, and
Yeah.
again, I think I'm the same as you. I've never been shy of asking questions.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I'm
Yeah.
constantly researching, and I'm constantly asking
Always.
girls who do different things in the
Yeah.
industry.
Completely. And for me, a lot of that is, you might have an inkling about something, or you might have come across a phrasing in a deal or something before, but I'd rather go and ask, whoever sent it to me, if I feel like I can ask them,
Yeah,
or if I know somebody else has dealt with the same experience before. If
yeah,
you know you are about to sign a deal with someone, I'll go, have you guys worked with this label before? What was your experience? Just getting knowledge. And
yeah.
yeah, I think,
Or have you seen this in a contract before?
yeah,
Is something,
exactly.
before it gets to like lawyer stage, is just going, uh, is that normal now?
Yeah,
Because obviously
yeah,
things change so often as well. Like the industry
completely.
changes.
Completely.
Yeah,
And, if my artist asks me a question about something and I don't know the answer, I will say to them, I will go and find out. I don't know that right now. Or, there's a billion things like, I got asked what the withholding tax in Spain is today, and I'm like, I don't know that. I'm gonna go and find out.
oh God, fun time.
Yeah.
What do you think? What have you found, particularly coming out of pandemic? Obviously, we're still dealing with all of the Brexit shit, which I don't think we're ever going to stop dealing with. Like, what do you think are the main challenges that you face? Like, being that person that is in control, I guess, of people's careers. Like, what are the main things that you think this is happening frequently, or this is something that all my friends are dealing with, or like, like, what do you think are the main things that we're facing?
Um, like in general across everything, or specifically around, like, exporting
I guess for
artists into a
you, I mean,
global.
just for you with the type of artists that you manage, and not necessarily, we don't have to have a conversation about export.
I think probably, and I feel like everyone is going through this, but trying to um, maintain connection across platforms that you aren't in control of.
Yes.
So even if you have a small number of followers on, it's literally every platform is doing this now. So it doesn't matter. I can name any of them. They're all throttling engagement. Um, and I think for me, trying to constantly communicate to an artist how important it is that we have some type of strategy on social media is increasingly difficult as engagement continues to plummet across
Yeah.
everything.
Mhm.
And I'm equally frustrated as the artists are, because I want to see results for them too. And I feel like there are alternatives, but when social media works, it really works.
Mhm.
That in the same way that sometimes those alternatives, like, whether it's having a Discord or having a mailing list or having a Patreon or having, even a WhatsApp group or whatever those
Yeah.
uber direct connections to your fans are, when something is able to go like, quote unquote, viral or have a moment, they work in a totally different way and propel you in a totally different way to, having that connection with your existing fan base does. So that's something that I find is like a daily challenge to try
Mine's
and
identical. Mine's
yeah.
absolutely identical. Like, I'm working a single at the moment, which is a total self-release, and it's just me and the bands that are doing it.
Mm,
And, they've not released anything for a while, but I've worked on singles in the meantime since their last release, and I don't think
yeah,
it's a genre thing, and I don't think it's, like,
it's not.
particularly their audience, but our strategy is shifted so much towards the things that we can control, because it's
Yeah,
just like, we can't. we can't control those algorithms and the way that they work, and we can't control those platforms. We don't want to put a load of money into something like that we don't think is going to have the effect that we want it to. But when we are getting flurries, we're pushing people towards the spaces where we can control it more.
Yeah.
Like Bandcamp, basically, like I'm on the mailing list. And it's just, it feels like, you know, if we think about the rhetoric around social media strategy for the last like decade, probably, is that it's content. You need to be posting every day. You need to be doing this. You need to be doing that. You need to be doing this. And it's just, I think that we've gone to the total opposite end of that now, where you shouldn't be doing all of that, because it'll fuck the algorithms up even more if you're flooding content onto those platforms. And it's just being really, really smart about it. And it's just like, I don't know what that means. I don't know what being smart about it on those platforms means anymore.
Yeah.
Because it feel like the control's been taken away. And it's just, it's weird. It's really, really strange that
Definitely.
we're focusing on those that aren't as visible. And that's the thing. It's just like, we're looking at, do we need to be incredibly visible to festival bookers, to all of this stuff, to, you know, it, like for optics? I think just optics, like, how important is that for us? Or do we just focus most of our attention into just building these audiences and places where we can keep them?
Yeah.
And what
and I do think that is genre specific. But I don't think the engagement down across everything is genre specific. I think that's everyone.
I think that's just social media. I think you're seeing this with musicians, with people that are making a living from, you know, creating content in different ways on platforms. We're seeing that just with people that engage with platforms, that they're not seeing what they want to see, like, which I find really odd.
Yeah, definitely.
Well,
and actually, I think the thing that compounds that for me is then some of the non-social stuff that also feels like it's having less and less impact. So, you know, your press, traditionally, you build up enough momentum at press. You've got lots of key pieces across the right publications, and you're just, the conversion of that into anything feels like it's really dramatically fallen off a cliff. I literally saw an artist who's a friend today who had played. They had a performance on Jimmy Fallon last year, and they said they were like, I think I got maybe 100 followers on Instagram after that. So like,
oh my God.
Just no. And I don't think that was because of a bad performance. I think that was just, the dots are really not connecting in lots of different spaces. You get a play on Radio 1, and maybe you'll get one follower from that. It's just, there's a huge disconnect between so many things right now. And I don't think anyone's particularly got it figured out. It's a lot easier when you've got momentum, and you've got everything all happening at the same time. But when it's, okay, that's happened over there, how can we make something happen over here? It's challenging.
One of the things that we found, myself and like the mentor team have been looking at recently, particularly with our local artists, is how long, and this sounds like I'm being very kind of like Spotify is everything, but I just think it's a kind of quite a key marker in mobilizing audiences, is that it seems to take quite a while for a lot of our local artists and bands. And it's like, you've said the kind of translation between getting press and things like that isn't connecting the dots sometimes. And we're seeing like, bands announcing that they're signing to particular labels, or like they're working with a booking agent now and they've jumped on this support tour and stuff like that. And then they release a single and it takes 3 weeks to get 1,000 streams. Like it feels like at the moment there's a real kind of, I don't know, like a reluctance maybe for that early support that's needed on these things, so that we can get algorithms and things like that to kick in, which is something that I found really, really interesting. And it's something that we want to kind of like, particularly locally, try to build up more of a sense of community, and that artists support other artists. If you know that an artist in your local scene has got a single coming out on that day, share it.
Yeah.
You know, like help them out, like, because I
Yeah.
just don't see that happening anymore. Like, it feels like before the pandemic there was lots of little cliques and lots of little collectives and of people that were lifting each other up, and it feels like now that a lot of people are just doing their own thing in their own
Mm,
space. And how we kind of bring that together is going to be our next plot,
yeah.
our next thing, because I think you know, I agree with like what you've said, and it's just like if we can do everything that we can that doesn't require
Mm,
knowing how those platforms are working or
yeah.
trying to kind of counteract how they're pulling us back, then we've got to do it, right? We've got to
Yeah.
make ourselves more visible and support each other and start from within so that we can all kind of get out, I think.
Completely. Completely, I agree.
But it's mad, it's just like, you know, like those kind of old blogging days, you know,
It
you'd
was
get
so
picked up.
powerful.
It was so powerful. You'd get picked up by, you know, like a big bunch of really, really key blogs, and you'd see your SoundCloud numbers going, you know, like overnight to like
You could do
100.
a tour off the back of that.
Do a tour off the back of it. It was so
Yeah.
mad. So it does feel like total uncharted territory at the moment,
Yeah.
which I find really fascinating and really interesting. And like I'm constantly trying to do workarounds of like not like falling into those reliances on the things
Mm,
that we relied on even like 2 years ago, let alone like 5 years, 10 years ago.
yeah, absolutely.
What yeah, like everything that you've said, I've just been like, yeah, that's the same, that's the same, which is really, really cool. It's making me feel, don't know about everybody else, but it's giving me a lot of validation right now. Um, I want to go back to that, to what we were saying before about like every single time I ever speak to a manager, the questions are, how do I find a manager? And you know, and we've talked about, do you need a manager? Like, what do you think that artists and bands should be doing themselves before they're even thinking about working with other people, I guess?
Um,
I know it comes down to that plan, but should they be holding back releases? Should they like what about, you know,
I think if
is
you've got, I think i- if you've, it depends, right? Like if you're, it depends on the artist. If you're like, you need, um, I'll use someone like Brie Runway as an example because she is somebody that like from day one, the visuals have been like 10/10. The
yeah,
styling has been like immaculate. The outfits, the hair, the makeup, the nails, the like, that's a production, right? That's from the get-go. The artwork has been, they've spent a colossal amount on that. And if you are an artist where that is you need that from day one, maybe you could hold back on some releases.
hmm,
Maybe you could put something out I guess it depends how you package it. If you want to put a mixtape out, maybe it feels a bit more casual. Maybe you
yeah,
want to put a demo out, a cover, a remix. You know, there's ways that you can structure things so that it isn't. You don't necessarily feel like you're shooting yourself in the foot by doing something that feels really DIY. If you want this overall like pop polished look, but I think for everybody else, you can kind of get the ball rolling.
yeah,
You know, uh, I don't think now people are looking at artists' first handful of releases really and expecting it to be the fully formed, wow, they've complete, you know, there's no input from anybody else needed on this. I think people are looking for the spark, the initial interesting intrigue or part of a project where you go, I want to jump on board because I've got some ideas for this, or a producer
yeah,
might see it and go, I'm wicked, I've got some songs that could work brilliantly for this, or a press person might go, if we did this, we can put them in XYZ spaces, or you know, you almost need a bit of that room for people to come in with ideas.
mhm,
So I think it's important as well at the beginning for an artist. I do think going through that process yourself with, it doesn't have to be, you know, a full project. It could be one track. Um, Going through the process of self-releasing something so that you know exactly what
yeah,
that process is like.
yeah,
And then you can go, oh wow, here's the 5 areas where I really need help in the campaign. Or, you know, you might you might smash it out of the park and go, great, I'm going to put the next thing out. You don't need a manager right now. Brilliant. That would be phenomenal. And great self-esteem booster for you as well. But I think it could just help identify some of those spaces, some of those areas where you go, do you know what? Dave in the band, he's fantastic at going out and meeting people that work in radio. So we don't need a radio plugger right now. Or Jerry, he's brilliant at getting on shows. So we didn't need a live agent. Or, I think it's about just trying to identify the key areas where you do need help and then working backwards from there. Because I think
Yeah.
sometimes people want a manager, but they don't really know what a manager does.
Yeah, and it's the fact that all managers have got different skills. So, like, if you're boss at getting shows, then maybe you go for a manager that's more strategic in other areas that you don't know anything about, like whatever it is, like, get somebody that complements what you want to keep control over, I guess, in a way as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. We have got a question which I think is quite specific, but also very open-ended at the same time. I have an artist who is incredibly talented. We're just done with their first EP. Should I get her a publishing deal from an independent publisher or get a distribution deal, e.g. AWOL Believe?
So they're obviously two separate things.
Yeah.
So is this referring to wanting to use some of the publishing income to fund the first project? I'd assume.
I would assume that's the case, which is something that I see quite a lot. I don't know about you, is that this has happened to an artist that I work with a who she worked with previously, where I feel like sometimes publishing is like seen as being a lower denominator in things, and that it's seen as like a quick financial fix to get a publishing deal. And then 2 years, 3 years down the line, everyone's trying to get out of those publishing deals that they signed initially because it wasn't the right thing. It was just a quick financial fix.
Yeah. I mean,
I've
if you
seen
meet the right publisher,
you are.
yeah, if you meet, as you say, if you meet the right publisher and it isn't just a short-term, like now thing, then absolutely. But if you could have both, that would be ideal. That would be brilliant. I think if what the crux of the issue is funding, I wouldn't necessarily feel right at the beginning. Maybe depending on the type of project and where you think it could go, you might not be maximizing what you're going to get out of that
Yeah,
publishing deal before putting any records out.
totally.
Unless you're able to create some like industry buzz and industry hype, the deal probably isn't going to be reflective of the actual worth of those copyrights. Depending on how long the deal's for, are they, do they want the songs forever? Is it, obviously lots of things are contingent on that, whether it's a good idea or not. I would definitely opt first and foremost for a distribution deal. Trying to get that over the line, I would definitely say is more of a priority. That would be how I would work for across my artists. But yeah, if you met the right publisher and the publisher was really enthusiastic and you felt like the deal was reflective of what you want it to be, then I don't see why that would be an issue. You just then have to make sure the artist is comfortable enough to then spend the money on putting the EP out. Are you going to then let depending on, I guess, the structure, is the artist then recouping that money to themselves? Is it, I think there's a few things to work out. But that publishing advance is for them to live on for the duration of that publishing deal. So you'd have to make sure that they're going to make the money back.
Not necessarily promo costs for an EP, is it?
Yeah.
I think as well, it's just like, if that is what the question is that it is a kind of like quick financial fix, is that there's other ways and means of making money and building money for promotional purposes, like help musicians, like their recording release fund, which is $3,000, is boss, and they definitely, if it's a female artist, they definitely have a big sway towards female artists at the moment, and it's a rolling deadline. So it means they're doing like they're assessing applications about like once a month, every 6 weeks, every 2 months, basically at the moment. Like put in that if you've got to like focus on your plan and get a solid plan and put in for that, and then think about merch. Like, you know,
Also, I have to, I will just jump in and say, like, really think about how much do you need for this
yeah,
first project?
I try
Like,
and do everything for like as cheap as humanly possible.
absolutely, absolutely. Like, it's their first EP, so at least on the first record, you should be to make those initial connections, you and the artist directly, ideally from the artist's emails, you should be emailing all radio and all promo press yourself to make that initial connection.
Build those relationships up so you can keep them then as well, can't you? It's like it's
Exactly.
not with a PR, it's not with a radio plugger, they're yours. Yeah, I
Exactly, and then
agree with
you
that as
never
well.
fully rely on anybody else for all contacts, because working with a PR company, they don't just give you their contact and say, "This person wants to do XYZ, so I'm gonna loop you in with them." That's not how it works. They maintain and manage that relationship, so you should absolutely, at the beginning, go out and make those, connections, and I think, hopefully something good comes off the back of that first release. And then if you are putting it out independently, that money's going straight back into your pocket that then you hopefully fund a later part of the first EP with, because it takes 2 to 3 months for the money to trickle back in. But even if there's like 300 quid that comes
Yeah.
in 3 months, you'll probably still be in that EP campaign. So there you go, you've got 300 quid for the EP release.
Yeah, I totally agree. Right,
But
I've got
don't
one.
just don't spend a bajillion pounds at the beginning.
I find that's something that I find
You've
quite
got to
interesting
maintain
as
it.
well. Like sometimes, we'll talk about like, right, okay, what would you do if you were releasing a single and you had £500 budget? And a lot of people will tell you how they spend that £500 rather than give you a plan about how they're going to release a single. I
Yeah,
think that's what it is. It's just like protect the money that you've got and work out a plan first that doesn't cost any money. And then if you've got a contingency, then you can put it into the areas where it's working to lift it, or think about how you can support the work that you're doing that doesn't cost anything.
yeah. But I also just think, like, if you start spending money at the beginning, you have to keep spending money.
It's a
Like,
yeah, it's a
there's
conveyor
nowhere
belt,
to
isn't it?
go.
Right, I'm on it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
there's nowhere
totally,
to go, right?
totally
There's no,
agree.
and I think you almost hamstring yourself by going, right, we're gonna go crazy at the very first song, because if that comes out and it does 1,000 streams, to get 1,000 streams for the next track, you're probably gonna have to spend the same, if not more.
Yeah, I totally agree. Right, I've got one more question and then I'm going to leave you to your evening. What is your favorite part of your role?
Ooh, um, there's loads. My favorite, the top bit. Um, I think just when you set out to do something and then you tick it off.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be the like, oh, we got a number one, or we did 10 million this or 20 million that, blah, blah, blah. I think it's just when you know something's really important to an artist, achieving that, for me, that's the best thing, right? Like, making money, great, everyone can eat, fantastic. But it's the hard, I guess it's the process of the hard work to get to the thing that you wanted to do. So whether it's like, for DJ that I look after, we'd said at the beginning of the year we really, really, really want to play Glastonbury. And we've been booked to play Glastonbury now. And it's like I pretty much, there was definitely one tear that came out of my eye when the booking came in, because I was like, I think I might actually just weep, because I'm so happy that this has happened, and like we've worked for it. We didn't just go, please, I hope it happens. Um, yeah, those bits for me.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it doesn't matter what size they are, is it? It is
Yeah,
exactly, if you've got a dream or there's something that you want to tick off and there's something that you want to do and that happens, it is the most rewarding feeling. Thank you
definitely.
so much, Jamila. That was
Yeah, no
awesome.
worries.
It was, thanks for being so honest and open, and there's loads and loads of good gems in there that we're definitely going to pull apart and use in future sessions. The next direct
Definitely.
input online is in 2 weeks on the 30th of March, and it's with Sam Ford, who is the editor of So Young magazine, runs So Young Records, and also puts gigs on underneath the like So Young umbrella as well. So he's going to be kind of talking about all sorts of shit. He's currently in South by Southwest at the moment, representing So Young, and has just released a single by a Manchester band called Nightbus, who I think are going to be playing Future Yard soon. But yeah, so we're going to be chatting to him on the 30th. So we'll send the link out soon for that. Thank you again, Jam. It's so nice to see you, and enjoy the rest of your evening. And I hope to see you really, really soon as well. Take
Thank
care.
you. See you soon.
See you later on. Bye bye.